you'll see this diagram of like a V-shaped chart, and the low frequencies, these are hertz, Hertz. Things like shame, guilt, anger, fear are really low frequencies, between 20 and 50 hertz. But the highest frequencies in the planet for the human experience is love at 528, peace at 600, and enlightenment at 700 to 1000.
Tom Cronin,
Hmm.
very happy to be meeting with you digitally from across the world. You're in Australia. I'm in
Yeah,
Belize.
it's great to be here. Thanks for inviting me along.
What do you think would be different if we were in the same space together right now?
There's a phenomenon for every form that is in the universe, and it's considered an event horizon, which is a sphere of influence. So if you take the sun, for instance, the sun is a physical form, but its sphere of influence, its energetic vibrational field of influence goes to Pluto and beyond. And that is magnetic pull. So all those planets that are pulled into the magnetic frequency of the sun, the heat, the light, all these different influences that are emitting from the sun. We take the moon, which is just a lump of mass out in space, yet it has vibrationally, beyond its physical form, the capacity to influence billions of tons of tides of water every day on our planet. And so we see this all around us, this sphere of influence, and we have this capacity vibrationally to influence our field around us. And of course, we can expand our field these days with things like podcasts. So I can be on a podcast and influencing someone in Canada or UK or Venezuela by what they hear. And what they're hearing is what's actually being said. And what I'm saying is coming from my vibrational resonance. So again, we have this, books that we write, songs that we write, performances that we create. But in physical person, there's a phenomenal influence that we have, that there's a frequency that we emit in that person's locality that is able to influence others. So we'll be connecting at that vibrational level. I think if we were to be in person, it's always a lot more. It's great that we can have these calls in you're in Belize and I'm here in Sydney, Australia. But there's something really special that happens when people come together and unify, and that's why things like church congregations have stood the test of time, yoga classes, because people like to commune and come together in a personalized experience in a locality. So I think it'll be a much more connecting experience.
Thank you for an excellent answer to what's actually a seemingly simple question. Can you tie that into our chemical aura, our chemical energies?
So I'm not a scientist of any sort. I study the science of life, I guess, which we call the Vedas in tradition of the Vedic tradition. Um, One thing they recognize in the Vedas, which is, like I said, a science of life, is a phenomenon called darshan. And some of the audience might have heard of Hugging Amma, a wonderful, maybe I'm guessing 60, 70, 80-year-old Indian guru. And she has this wonderful darshan. Darshan is the impact that an awakened one has on those around them. But darshan really comes back to event horizon. It's that sphere of influence. And so
Mhm.
people will queue up for many, many hours to get a hug from the Hugging Amma. And
Mm.
the reason why they queue up 10, 12, 24 hours sometimes to get this hug is because when they get that hug, something changes in their vibrational resonance. She has her powerful frequency. And we only have to look at the love frequency chart. If you just Google love frequency chart, you'll see this diagram of like a V-shaped chart. And the low frequencies, these are hertz, Hertz. Things like shame, guilt, anger, fear are really low frequencies, between 20 and 50 hertz. But the highest frequencies in the planet for the human experience is love at 528, peace at 600, and enlightenment at 700 to 1000. So if you come into the field, vibrational resonance of someone that is in a high frequency, they're so sustained and so established in that frequency that low frequencies don't influence them. You know how people will say, "You triggered me, you impacted me, you made me feel this way." That's because they're not sovereign, they're unstable, and they're easily influenced by the machinations of life, which is why they listen to Spotify, eat ice cream, and take fentanyl if that's what they take. And so we're constantly wanting things to influence our state because we're not sovereign in it. If you look at an enlightened person, they're so established in their state that they're the ones that are influencing other people's states. When people come into their field in a low vibration, they get darshan, which is an up leveling, and their frequency actually rises in a synchronized state to the person that they're in companionship with. And we see this with talks, we see this with retreats, we see this as coming into communion with high vibrational beings is a very powerful way for people to have transformational experiences. The beauty of what I understand is this chemical field and chemical influence, I would call it a biochemical influence, because we have the capacity to shift our biochemistry, which is our vibrational resonance. It's a state that we're in, and I think that this is something that first and foremostly we want to really work on establishing a high frequency state within us. But if we're struggling to do that ourselves, then come into the vicinity and the communion and the companionship of other high vibrational beings, and you'll find that that's going to slowly influence your state as well.
That's beautiful. That reminds me of a good friend of mine from New York City who I haven't seen in many years, but he's just known for the hugs that he gives.
Mm-hmm.
Dan, you know who you are. We're already bringing this conversation to such a high frequency, but let's just bring it down a little bit and talk about remote work. Working remotely is here to stay and is increasing. And the same is true, unfortunately, probably for burnout. It's persistent, it's on the rise. You hear the phrase mental health crisis more often. Individuals can experience burnout, teams can experience burnout too. With so many of us working remotely, those isolated conditions, how might they be exacerbating the phenomenon of burnout, especially in those team dynamics?
And I do a lot of work with corporations and organizations to help reduce burnout. And the first thing is when we have, let's just say, a team coming together, but we're all working remotely, we're only coming together through digital platforms. That's the only possibility, right? So it's either on a phone or a computer. So we're constantly in this space of technology and frequencies, Wi-Fi's and all sorts of things. And the thing that's being underestimated with the efficiency of being able to work remotely, because we save time on commuting and all these wonderful things that enable us to just get up out of our pajamas and have a cup of tea and then suddenly start working from home, and it's much more efficient supposedly, but the price to pay is really quite substantial. And there's a lot to be said about the congregation, like we talked about before, of people coming together. Because when you have a team meeting, when everyone's in the office, you actually don't do it on gadgetry, on technology. You actually do it around a boardroom, most likely a wooden table. And there's something really important about being able to remove the constant dependency on technology and having more human experiences. It would be like a church congregation that decided to save everyone time from traveling to work. We would just make it available for everyone, and we wouldn't have the church building. It's expensive and we don't need the land and we don't need the building. We can sell it off to apartments, and we'll just continuously have all of our church gatherings or our yoga classes, whatever that communion space is, to be only having that on group Zoom calls. You'd find a really fragmented, disconnected level of community. And so it's that constant dependency on technology is one of those things that I think is causing part of the burnout and part of the problem, losing that human connection that happens when we come into locality together.
I really draw a distinction between intentional IRL and return to office mandates, because I really do not believe that forcing people into a concrete office building is really going to produce those types of results. even if you bring that chemical aura with you, right? And I'm within 3 meters of you and I'm feeling your energy is fundamentally changed by the setting that you're in and the experience that you're having throughout the day. So I will die on that hill of intentional IRL. Um, However,
Yeah.
I just want to kind of dig into a little bit when time is designed intentionally for a remote team to actually get together, what really changes, um, and when that time is intentionally designed, like how can that bolster team dynamics in ways that are impactful beyond just that time spent together?
Most likely going to be a place for balance with these organizations. I think that, 10 hours a day sitting in a, partitioned office with fluorescent lights and air conditioning in a city that's taken them an hour to get to and an hour to get home. I think we're going to look at finding ways to have balance. And I think this, like you said, intentional ways to gather. So what if we were to bring that workplace together in a different environment where they could work efficiently and effectively from home, but then maybe we gather in a park somewhere or we gather somewhere at a offsite, um, outside of the city for an evening or a day or something like that. So I think we're going to find better ways to bring our workplace together for more specific purposes and have better outcomes as a result of that. And coming back to your question, what are the outcomes that if we have these intentional in real life experiences, then I think what we're going to see is this a greater. What's really important for an organization is sense of working for something that's bigger than you. Working for something that you want to support the vision, you want to support the quest, you want to support the group of people that you feel passionate about and you connect with. So having connection in the workplace with the community is so powerful because when we come together and work together and collaborate together and connect together at a more personal level, I think then if the company is a company that has a vision and has a mission, then I think the people that are underneath that vision and mission for that company, they're going to be much more. You tend to find that they have this greater capacity to excel than I'm just turning up because I've got a paycheck and need to pay my mortgage. And I think there's ways for companies to really inspire staff when they bring them together with those types of more meaningful experiences. And what does it look like for us to meditate together? What does it look like to go for a bushwalk together? What does it look like to commune together over a meal? But within that, have more meaningful discussions outside of the day-to-day menial tasks that need to get done with the company. So I think I work with a lot of companies, and we're seeing this more and more, where they're really wanting to make the workplace a more meaningful place. I think this is going to be a really important thing when we have meaning and passion and purpose and a vision and a mission, then people really get behind that as a collective, I think.
I think what you're speaking a lot to is we're all evaluated as individual contributors much of the time, but actually the team dynamic is immensely impactful. The culture of the organization is immensely impactful. And how does culture get shaped? Is culture shaped in a more intentional, impactful way when experiences happen IRL more often?
And I know some companies here in Sydney, Canva is a classic example, and some of you around the world might know of Canva, a huge Australian company now. But the staff at Canva, everyone I met that works at Canva, they actually love working at Canva. And I think a lot of that is because of if you were distant and never went into the office and never had a connection with the community at Canva, then you would just be doing a task. You'd have, hey, you've got XYZ number of hours to fulfill a task. Please go and get that done while you're at home on your computer. But when you come into a more communal experience and you can see the contribution that that company is making towards their staff with the way they lay out the office, the things that they provide for the staff within the office, the things that they provide for the staff outside of the office, what happens is when that company is perceived to be contributing in a big way and going out of their way to give more than just a salary for exchange for their work that they do, but to really give the staff a wonderful experience, then there's a reciprocation. And we used to have that with my company I worked with for 26 years. And that wasn't unusual for a member to be within that company for 20 to 25 years. This is as a broker when I was on a trading room floor. But the company understood that the staff are actually the company. The company is not a logo, it's not a brand, it's not a profit and loss statement. It's actually a group of people that turn up every day to do something for the company. And if those people don't want to work at that company, then they lose the key asset to the company, which is the staff. And so they understood that retention of the staff was one of the most important things. The things that cost the economy a lot is actually loss of staff. It's people don't really understand a lot of the times companies when I go to them where they have this sort of let's just exploit them. They don't realize how valuable the staff are and the wellness of the staff, the passion of the staff, the enthusiasm for the staff to work for that company. And it's a long term investment to make sure that your staff want to be in that company, want to be working for that company, and that comes back to the level of contribution that that company is making towards the staff. And yes, it will cost you a little bit more money to do that by creating these offsites, to creating these experiences, to be providing more contribution to the staff, but realizing that the return on investment on that will be that you have staff for a long, long time in your company, and that's going to, in the end, keep you some of the best staff in the community, but also save you a lot of money on turnover of staff, which is very expensive.
Even for a company that has office space and expects their staff to be in the office even 5 days a week, talk to me about how changing the setting can really change the impact of that time together.
One thing that has been proven to change the setting of an environment is having natural plants.
Mm.
There's something about having natural light, natural plants. Another big one is running water. Having a fountain of some sort. If we look at Feng Shui and Sapachaveda, which is Feng Shui is the sort of a more Taoist perspective on the environment that we live and work in, and Sapachaveda is the Vedic viewpoint of construction and buildings and the way we live within an environment. And there's a very much an overlap of those two perspectives, that the setting for a workplace is absolutely critical for the overall nourishment and sense of harmony and balance and feeling pleasant and pleased to be in that environment.
Well, if one plant is good for team harmony, then a whole jungle, that's where you go to solve your hardest problems.
Very specific about where I look to run my retreats, particularly in Bali. I think for offsites, for companies looking for places where there's a lot of nature, it's elevated, there's a lot of light, really conducive to wellness and harmony.
I love that. You had a very profound experience in 1996, which commenced a decades long journey with meditation. You've intentionally gone within for decades now. And I'm curious about how you feel about the differences between intentionally going within and intentionally spending time in real life with others in a group.
So in 1996 was the culmination of a 10-year career in finance. I started in 1987, so I was just coming to the end of that. And it was crazy times. The markets was like the wild, wild west. There was no regulation, no human resources, no people and culture. It was sort of unregulated, unchecked. And so it was just a crazy time. A lot of drugs, a lot of drinking, a lot of wildness. And this was a balmy summer's day in February 1996. As I was getting ready for work, I collapsed on the floor and I thought I was having a heart attack, but I got taken to the doctor by my partner, and the doctor explained that I was actually having a nervous breakdown. I was at home for a few weeks and months, and in that time, there was no internet. This was 1996, no Foxtel, no Netflix, and so I was just watching TV. And interestingly, I was watching a documentary about a very successful property developer, and he was talking about how he used transcendental meditation as a tool for his stress management. And they showed him in a suit, in a chair, meditating, and it looked so profound and so peaceful. And it was a light bulb moment for me. It was like, that's what's missing in my life. So I went deep down that rabbit hole of Vedic philosophy, doing the meditation, and it was a real game changer for me. So I went back to work and continued meditating. I stopped the drugs and the drinking and the partying. and would meditate before work and meditate after work every single day. And then I'd go away and do retreats. And then over time, as I furthered my studies and got more and more passionate about the impact that this was having, not just in my life, but other people around me that I'd referred to other teachers, I felt it was time for me to become a teacher. In the Vedic worldview, we recognize there are two phases in this journey. And this has always been the way for thousands of years. Stage one is the yogi phase. Stage two is the rishi phase. So yogi phase is where we retreat, we withdraw, and we look to cultivate a sense of foundational resonance, a state of being, and a state of equanimity, a state of sovereign calmness, a state of unflappable peace. And this comes through our consistent daily withdrawal from the stimuli of the world, from relativity and the impact that life has on us, to continually go within and to connect and stabilize that part of us that is unshakable, unmovable. We call this being, the essence of being. And when that becomes more and more stabilized, when that becomes more and more prevalent in our experience, and when our frequency becomes higher and higher frequency, there's a natural inclination to go into the next stage. This is where I do a lot of my work these days, is working with those people that are feeling that compulsion to transition into going from the inward state to the outward state. So the intentional within and the intentional group experiences, I think, are both important. I think in equal portions. I think the group experiences are enhanced if that community has the capacity to go within. And go within means not just look at your thoughts and your feelings, but go deeper than that itself. The technique of meditation that I teach is a transcending meditation, Vedic meditation. And we use mantras to transcend thoughts, to transcend feelings, to transcend the idea that I exist within the physical realm of my body and experience an unbounded unified field of oneness in the, we call it the absolute with a capital A. And it's recognized for thousands of years that there is a field of reality that is not limited to thoughts, feelings, and physical dimensions. And that experience of that unified field is, I think, a core and key component to what it is to exist as a human. And know that, yes, the analogy we use is that there's a wave in the ocean, but the ocean isn't the wave. The wave may identify as a wave, but it's really important that that wave identifies also as the ocean. And if it doesn't identify as a wave and as the ocean and only identifies as a wave, then it's trapped in the limitations and the timeline of its temporary existence, its finite existence. And this is the problem with humans, is that we're so trapped in our thoughts, feelings, and physicality, we're missing the gargantuan reality that you're actually a unified field of pure bliss, pure love. And when we transcend those three layers of seeming identity, thoughts, feelings, and physicality, in the going in journey, then we start to feel a greater sense of oneness, compassion, kindness, and care for other, because we start to realize that other is actually an extension of us, just as the wave, when it realizes its oceanic experience, realize that all the waves are its oceanic experience. And so, coming to retreats, when you have, we've got one coming up in a month's time, 30 people, and to be in communion with 30 people that are all intentionally going inward, there's a powerful process that happens. You can have that person do exactly the same retreat experience on their own, or do it with 30 people. There's like a 100x, 1000x impact on them doing it in this compounded effect of doing it with other people. It's really, really powerful. Our venue, particularly the one we use in Bali, it does all the heavy lifting for me. And people are already starting to transform when they get out of their car from the airport. You can see the look on their face and the shoulders starting to drop in a nice, relaxed way, and their body's starting to soften just as they walk into the foyer and they get their nice cloth and they get their nice drink from the resort, and we welcome them, their gift bag, and take them to their beautiful luxury villa, and they look down the valley of the beautiful forest, the lush mountains of the rainforests of north of Ubud in Bali, and you know they haven't even started the program yet. And the venue itself is making a huge transformational shift on them.
Let's flip the script. I want you to say something totally unhinged about the power of connecting IRL.
Totally unhinged. Coming together isn't just enough. That's the unhinged part I'd probably have to say here. The idea of bringing whole groups of people from different religions, different nationalities, different sexes, different genders, and all sorts of things. And this is again, coming to the gender debate. It's when you start having deeper practices and coming together, that's when the magic really happens. So just coming together alone isn't necessarily enough. I think coming together alone, and then what are we doing when we do come together? And this is my job. Is I've been working with law firms, some of the biggest consulting firms in the world, with Amazon, Coca-Cola. How do we give people practices, exercises, experiences that transcend those seeming points of difference and allow a greater sense of connectivity beyond the gross level of difference? What I would suggest is that we be very mindful of the allocation of our time and attention going forward, and look for the beauty in life. It doesn't mean we put our head in the sand and ignore any of the tragedies in the world, but if we have more people on the planet appreciating the beauty of life, making an intentional difference in their own vibrational state by being in a high frequency, that's the greatest shift and the greatest change we can create in the world, because your vibrational resonance, coming back to the very start of this this call, is that we have an emitting frequency that changes our environment. And so if we recognize the beauty of life, we witness the magic of life, we raise our frequency through intentional practices, then that's the greatest gift we can bring to the planet. If every person on the planet was in a higher frequency, love or above, then we'd have a very different planet.
That's beautiful. On that note, I think it's time for both of us to get up and physically go back to IRL.
Mm.
Tom Cronin, always a pleasure.
Likewise. Thanks for such a beautiful conversation. I enjoyed. Thank you very
Thank
much.
you so much. Have a beautiful day.
IRL means in real life, right?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. For these young kids these days, I have everything short to 3 letters. So LOL. Right? What's that one? YKR. Like I just got to work out all what these little things mean. Make sure.
IYKYK.
Yeah, if you know, you know.